Hey boss, today we'll be exploring one of my favorite tropes or character types in anime and manga. That being characters with the title of the strongest. We'll talk about the things that define these characters, the role that they play in storytelling, why they are so damn cool in my opinion, and I'll even speak a little bit about a role that these characters are perfect for, but that I absolutely hate that they play. And at the end of it all, I will answer one of the most iconic questions in anime manga history. Geto, take it away.
Do you think you're the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo? Or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest?
Great question, Geto. You see, many anime have very interesting power systems that are very difficult to master. In fact, to do so requires a deep knowledge of the power system, sprinkle in a ton of experience within that power system, and don't forget a heaping serving or two of raw talent. And maybe, just maybe, you get a character in the same ilk as powerhouses like Satoru Gojo from JJK, Genryusai Yamamoto, also known as Captain Commander from Bleach, Yoriichi from Demon Slayer, and a handful of other characters that are often a testament to what complete mastery of the world's power system looks and feels like. If you stick with me though, I will show you why. When done right, characters like these can be so much more than just the strongest. First, I'd like to explore the type of character that we are looking at. I'm not speaking about situations where the main character starts off as or becomes the strongest person within their universe. I am exclusively talking about side characters that fill this role. Most of the time, they have been known as the strongest long before the events of the story even began. You see, I think one of the most interesting features of this type of character is that they can serve as a limiting factor for the antagonists or villains. What do I mean? Let's use two conversations to illustrate what I am talking about. The first conversation comes from JJK and occurred between Kenjaku and the disaster curses in a cafe. In this conversation, Kenjaku, the main antagonist for most of the show, and arguably one of the smartest characters in that entire universe, tells the disaster curses that in order to achieve their goals, they must quote-unquote render Satoru Gojo incapable of fighting. The second conversation comes from Bleach and occurred mid-battle between Aizen and Captain Commander Yamamoto. After Yamamoto's flames are extinguished, Aizen, again the main antagonist and one of the smartest characters in that universe, explains that he could never face Yamamoto in a one-on-one battle. Instead, Aizen had to strip one of his minions of the ability to speak, his intelligence, memory, and even his reasoning, just so that he could nullify Yamamoto's power. Besides just being badass, both of these conversations illustrate perfectly my favorite part about these types of characters. They can serve as one of the main hurdles to the antagonist and make it that much harder for them to achieve their goals. They force the antagonist to have two plans. The first plan is simply the plan that they will use to achieve their main goal, whatever that may be. In the case of Kenjaku, it was to start the Culling Games and use Tengen to ignite the merger. For Aizen, it was to fuse with the Hokyoku and replace the Soul King. Now the second and arguably more important plan is the plan to incapacitate the strongest. And notice that I say incapacitate. Very rarely is the plan to actually defeat a powerhouse character like Gojo or Yamamoto. Instead, the most that can be done is just finding a way to keep them from completely wrecking that first plan. I personally refer to this as being a two-plan character. Someone that needs a specific and dedicated scheme to deal with. Otherwise, they will wreak havoc on any other goals that you may have. Now, for this exact reason, people often believe that these characters are really hard to write. And they'd be right about that. It's not easy to write such a powerful character without completely killing the tension in your story. Hell, I'm just speculating here, but this could be one of the reasons why the author of JJK seems to hate Gojo so much. regardless of his popularity. So, once again, I want to talk about two instances where I believe this notion has been shattered. The first is directly to do with Gojo once again. And although short, this was one of my favorite fights in all of JJK. I'm talking like right behind Yuji's dad versus Kenjaku's back. The tension-filled fight that I'm talking about is Mechamaru versus Mahito.
領域展開自閉言論化
The fight that happened right after Mahito fixed Mechamaru's body. Although Gojo didn't even participate in that fight, it is hands down one of his biggest flexes, and a perfect example of how to use an absurdly broken character to add tension to the story or fight. In this situation, contacting Gojo was Mechamaru's entire win condition. And even crazier is that everyone involved knew that. Kenjaku himself creates a barrier just so Mechamaru can't call or otherwise contact Gojo. And in my opinion, the fight was full of tension. At this point, we as the audience have been shown many times how absolutely cracked Gojo is. We have been told that he's the strongest, we have seen him be the strongest, and other characters truly act like he's the strongest. So everyone is on the same page. If Gojo catches whiff of what's going on, Mechamaru will be safe, and Mahito could die. The audience knew that Mechamaru would not be able to beat Mahito or Kenjaku, let alone both. What we could believe is that Mechamaru, especially after busting out the giant nightmare frame, could escape the barrier and contact Gojo, who would protect them. In my opinion, this was top tier tension, and it was only possible because of the Honored One. Wait, now that I think about it, is this entire video just a convenient excuse to glaze Gojo?
You're goddamn right.
Fair enough. Let's keep going. Another show that was able to create an exceptional version of the strongest character while not affecting the tension of the story is Demon Slayer. Of course, I'm talking about the progenitor of Sun Breathing himself, Yoruichi Sugikuni. He was obviously the pinnacle of power in this universe, and we were shown the ease with which he defeated the most powerful demon of all time. I mean, if Yoruichi was not caught off guard by Muzan turning into Deidara and just exploding all over the place, Yoruichi would have likely killed him in their first encounter. I, for one, find that pretty cool, man. Demons that Muzan created since their first encounter came with that fear of Yoruichi pre-installed. Demons feared the man instinctually, like he might as well have been the sun itself. And Muzan's only solution was to wait until this man passed of old age. Let's be honest, the choice to introduce this character in a manner that allows him to showcase what the pinnacle of breathing techniques is, but doesn't allow him to solve any of the modern day issues, was a very deliberate one. And on top of that, the situation also highlights that Muzan is truly a coward that is petrified of death. Yoruichi exposes Muzan to the audience in a way no one else could have. I am sure that these are not the only examples of having tension-filled moments while still involving powerhouses. If you have a good one that I missed, please drop it in the comments below. I'd love to know what moments got you hyped and thinking, yep, he's the one. Honestly, I really think it's interesting to think about how useful a powerful, near unbeatable character can be to telling a story. They can serve as motivation for both the surrounding cast and the audience to really invest into understanding the power system because they are able to show off the upper bounds of that power system. In a lot of situations, they help flesh out other characters by allowing the writer to explore how those other characters react to their strength. As I mentioned, nowhere is Muzan's cowardice more on display than when faced with Yoruichi. In a similar fashion, the dangerous and calculating nature of Kenjaku was on full display as he methodically planned to neutralize Gojo without having to defeat him in a fight. Now, speaking of fleshing out other characters, that is unfortunately how most of these powerful characters meet their end. I am referring to a role that can only be accomplished by an incredibly powerful figure, yet I hate that some of my favorite characters, such as Gojo and Captain Commander, have had to play it. You see, when a story needs to establish how incredibly powerful the current threat is, there is a surefire way to do so, and that is by having said threat finally defeat the strongest and thus take that title from them. Admittedly, characters like Captain Commander and Gojo are perfect for accomplishing this task. When it's all said and done, characters like Gojo and Captain Commander are often built up, given incredible feats, shown to have insane amounts of power, so that at the right time, they can be torn down. And boom! All of the gravitas that they once had is now transferred over to that current threat. Think of it as their final favor to their mangaka. That's it. So, having said all that, I can now attempt to answer one of the most well-known and one of my favorite questions in anime. Do you think you're the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest? Now, of course, this question is not black and white. It's not a yes or no question. It's more like on a spectrum than it is binary. But no one likes a fence sitter, so I'm going to answer it in one way or another. Now, within the context of JJK, I'll start with what I believe to be the wrong answer. Are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest? In this statement, strength is the cause, while being Gojo is the result. I believe that this is what Geto believes to be the case, and why he calls Gojo arrogant. Geto believes that Gojo's power defines him, and not the other way around. Meaning that if he were to switch places with Gojo, that he would now be Gojo, because Gojo is defined by his power. And who knows, for some time, he might have been correct. But I believe that by the time Geto asked these questions, he was already wrong. Now the correct answer. Do you think you're the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo? In this case, Gojo is the cause, being the strongest is the result. Within JJK, there are actually two characters that are meant to represent the concept of extreme power, and have been referred to as the strongest. The second character being Sukuna. Gojo, unlike Sukuna, gives meaning to his strength. He chooses to carry a burden that no one else is equipped to carry, and allows that to drive him to become as strong as possible. Again, he is far from perfect, but I believe that imperfection is actually what makes him Satoru Gojo, and thus the strongest. Sukuna, on the other hand, is 1000% defined by his strength. There is absolutely no meaning behind it. He is strong for the sake of being strong, and he allows that strength to dictate his actions. He does things simply because he has the power to do them. All this to say that even at the time that Geto questioned Gojo, he had already started giving meaning to his strength and his title as the strongest. Honestly, this is what separates Gojo from a lot of other characters within the strongest trope, and why I believe he is so popular. Alright boss, if you've made it this far, I can't thank you enough, and I'd like to ask you one final question. If you find this one to be a softball, they can get harder. Besides the Gojo clan, what are the names of the other two great sorcerer clans in JJK? Please leave an answer in the comments. If we get enough answers, you never know, we could start doing drawings after these. Either way, you'll get the answer in the next video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.